Hey everybody, thanks for stopping back in at the Red Barn, where this episode, I thought I was going to be back working on the Ferrari 360 Swap 914, but it turns out, no, we are back on Wide Red, and I have to say, the theme of this episode is you don't want to meet your heroes. I have seen pictures of this car, this wide body 914, for years and years, and I thought, man, that is got to be the coolest 914 out there. I just love this thing, and as you guys have seen for the past few episodes, it looks great from 10 feet, but under the covers there's a lot of stuff we need to correct. And as that saying goes, be careful, you don't want to meet your heroes. There's another version of that. I think the original version was don't touch your idols because the gold may come off. I think that's kind of what we're experiencing here. Like I said, beautiful car, careful, needs some help. So let's go back to the Secret Undisclosed shop and bring this car up to the level it deserves to be at. Enjoy. Okay, we are here at the back of the car, and I want to take you through, Greg's actually going to take you through. I'm just going to be the guy that stands here. I'm the Caltrans guy with the stop and slow sign. Greg's doing all the hard work.
True teamwork.
There you go. We saw the engine cover last time, and we know about these pieces that come up and make that ramp and support this main cover. Take us through what's going on up here and what your ideas are for finishing off this removable section so we can get to the distributor.
You brought me this piece that came out of the Ferrari car, and we were trying to make it to where it can clearance the distributor, right, but look kind of like a factory item teamed up with the lines of our other part of the car, which work out quite well.
Yeah, I think that looks really good.
So what we're working on right now is the tie together of where this comes in and this comes in, and it's going to an angled piece right now.
Okay, so there's a third element right here.
And that's going to stay in the car where, you know, a couple of bolts, and this comes off to service engine.
There it is. Okay, I get it.
And then this will come back down, get a couple of bolts that put this back together very easily to service that distributor.
Okay, and then 914 folks would know that there's a seal that runs along this part of the sheet metal. And what Greg's done is he's built this, I'm going to call it the intermediate or the removable piece. This is a lovely piece of fab right here. And so I want to actually take some time. What did it take you to make this?
So it took breaking 2 brakes.
Pull that out and let's look at the back side of it. Might be easier to see.
It took 2 brakes to build it to where it has the same shape as what it had, but then I had to shrink one whole side of it to make it get that curve.
Okay, so let me take you back and ask you the whole process. You started with a flat sheet. You put this 90 in it first.
Correct.
And so this extended way farther out. This whole section was still there. And then you stretch this to get the curve to match the curve that needs to be there for the seal to work against the underside of the trunk. Okay.
Correct.
Then you put this bend in it.
No, these 2 bends go in at the same time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's brake. So then I have like this Z in it.
Okay.
I then stretch this a little bit, and then I shrink this side more.
Got it.
So then it comes around and has that curvature to it.
So you're chasing this dimension, which is the critical one, by going a little bit here with a stretch, and then you're stretching the outside curve, you're shrinking the inside curve to get that final shape.
Then once I have this holding its shape, I then trim this out to make it, because that
needs a landing pad.
Needs to land on, and I couldn't get into the brake with that. I couldn't make a double brake. I had to make an inner piece that I had to then
I get it.
tack to this.
Got it.
And welds to this. So this has spot welds on it that go to
kind of disappeared.
And then it gives you a factory looking
that's awesome.
Butted piece at the top. Now I'm getting ready to make the end caps and flat pieces that go to the rest of the car.
And so let's get that back in there for a second and look at. So the factory seal that we can use will simply be cut right here, and there'll be a piece that stays here, and obviously the rest of it'll stay here. So that part's taken care of. And then what's kind of cool, I think, is it's just going to drop down to this level. So there's just going to be a little bit of an intermediate triangle right there, and this plane's going to carry across. You mentioned earlier, this piece has to be extended up and extended out because it's not long enough so that we can access the fasteners here, here. So both of these pieces come out. So there's a permanent piece here, and then we're back to having the crossbar. And I have to confess, I had a design that I was shopping with Greg, and he said, no, you need to make it so just the upper distributor cover can come out. And I said, well, it's not that big of a deal if both pieces have to come out. And he wouldn't hear that. He wouldn't hear that. He was saying, that's not how I want to do it. We went, and it's not like we're arguing. We're kicking around ideas because all of a sudden somebody will come up with something and it'll be like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's a much better idea. And today, when I got here, he's like, look, all we have to do is extend this up and extend it back, and we can get to the fasteners everywhere.
This comes out, there it is. I didn't want it too complicated on like having to service the spark plug wires or the distributor.
So rough estimate, not even rough because you're tracking your hours, what do you have in that to make it? What do you think?
Well, I have about, in this, as of right now, I have 4.5 hours.
Okay, so 4.5 hours to make this piece. So when people talk about custom fab stuff, I'm always not surprised. I guess I've heard it enough where, like I mentioned earlier, like you saw in the last episode, where I was talking about how that patch looked like it would only take like 10 minutes and it took like close to 2 hours. Any kind of cool custom fab work, it takes way longer than most people think. You guys that are watching that have done fab work or worked on your cars and made any kind of parts, you know it's always take your estimate, double it, and then double it again. And so I'm not surprised that
we're also
it took
trying to reuse this piece.
Oh, that's true.
Which also, when doing it, didn't have straight lines. We had a lot of things like welded to the backside that I had to remove. The factory components. Some of the factory things to it that ended up taking an hour and a half longer than if I started with new metal. But then I would have been at the same time of bead rolling and making
and good luck trying to make it look like a factory part. You know? Not that we can't do something nice, but that's very cool. You know, it's got this lovely little stop curb, you know, this thing here, and it drops in nice. Anyway. Yeah. So we think it's worth doing that kind of a thing. And as you've heard me say all along, the customer is being kept up to date on all this stuff, and he seems very pleased with all of the things we're doing. All right, so there you go. So that's the engine cover. A few more hours probably. Yeah. And this will be wrapped up, and this will all get painted, and it'll mostly disappear after all that hard work. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, here's a picture I found of this car when it had that crossbar in it. And the other thing I would point out is if you look through to where that seat is that you can see, that seat has a brace. And here you can see on the back of the firewall the remnants of that support tube that came out to a plate that race seat was bolted to. So we got some tidying up to do there because that's not doing anybody any favors sticking through like that as a cutoff tube. But anyway, big thanks to Greg for the continued awesome fab stuff. I would be very proud to have this in my car, and I think the owner's going to dig it. Anyway, good job. Good job. So we're going to walk through how this whole engine cover distributor removable panel setup works. Greg's got it almost ready to go in permanently, but I wanted to just walk you through what he's got going on here. So just to get you up to date, these panels are, again, still just screwed in because all this stuff's got to be fitted before, fitted, clecoed in, so we know exactly where it's going to go, because the crossbar has to weld back in first, because obviously once these panels are in place, you couldn't get to the underside of this weld. So all this stuff's got to be completely fit. The crossbar's got to get welded in, then these pieces get snuck in and permanently welded in. So Greg, can you walk through kind of like what you've got going and how this all goes together?
Intermediate panel. And then we have...
And then there's the big panel.
The big panel. This is going to go in.
Oh, can you, cleco that bad boy in place, and let's get an idea of how that might look.
That's going to get screwed down.
Yeah, and then once that'll get that, we'll have a line of fasteners going across the top. This is the super duper cool thing. Now, again, this has been spot welded and dressed, and they've kind of been disappeared, but you can see, I think it's coming through. There's spot welds that are factory. You can see the remnants of them across here. And if you look here, Greg's done a nice job of kind of replicating that look. But these are those little triangle end pieces, and this will be separately removable for servicing the distributor. And so while some of you might think, well, hold on a second, that doesn't look very good. And then once the crossbar, again, this would have been in there first, so this is not the assembly order. But once the crossbar is in place, there is the whole deal, right? So separately removable, and then that'll be permanent. Once this is all painted, I think it's gonna look awesome. So there you go. That is the update on the engine cover, and I think probably we won't cover much more about this because now it's just the boring part of drilling and fitting and welding and all the other stuff. But maybe Greg can do some video if I'm not around. But again, I'm really happy with that. I think the owner is going to be really happy with that. So thank you. Awesome stuff. All right, back here with Greg, and we're just reviewing his wrap-up of all the work on the interior. And those of you that know 914s would say, hey, those aren't factory spot welds. But for everybody else, this thing looks just about perfect. As you saw from the previous episode, the patch in the floor cross member is all set up. He's tidied this up with a patch and done his best to, done a good job of matching the look of the weld to the rest of the firewall weld. So this is all taken care of. That thing's all repaired, the front latch catch. And about all we have to do left in here is we got to redo this throttle cable. It's really difficult to modulate, and it's not smooth at all. So that's going to get redone. And then we're also going to go after the shift linkage, all the shift linkage bushings from the shifter through the firewall, and also back on the transmission will be replaced. It doesn't shift great. It's got a lot of slop in it. So we'll take care of that. And that'll also give us an opportunity to start taking a look at the drivetrain, which we haven't looked at yet. So once the engine cover is done, which is being worked on the bench right now, once this whole thing's wrapped up, we're kind of at a pause until the nose or the front trunk panel comes in. And so we're going to get it up on the lift, start looking at the brakes, start again looking at the shift linkage and stuff like that, and going after some of the more mechanical stuff. The other thing we're going to do is, many of you may not have noticed, this wheel is way too wide for these tires. These are 11s and 14s. And if you look at what's going on here, it's kind of got the, this is not a great curb feeler. So these wheels are probably like 1.5 inches to 2 inches too wide for the tires that actually fit on the car and allow, you still have to be able to turn without rubbing on anything. And you can't tell now, well, maybe you can tell, this tire was rubbing on the outer lip of the fender. Not a great setup. And you can see it's doing, it's just not right. So talking with the owner, we're going to end up needing to source some probably, well, I don't know which way we're going to go. I like this deep dish look. But as we narrow the wheel, we have to be able to position it in the wheel well properly, and that's going to require a set of spacers, the proper set of spacers, and that's probably going to necessitate, it's hard to tell looking in there, but it's probably going to necessitate pressing in a different set of wheel studs so we can get the proper engagement on the lug nuts with the proper spacer to get the wheel positioned with the right width wheel. So a little bit of analysis to do on that, and we can start doing that sort of stuff once we get the car on the lift, which we're going to do after the engine cover gets done. So there you go. And now with the interior all tidied up, we can start looking at the things we have to take care of in here. Maybe that the brake master cylinders, we need to check out, make sure they're sized properly, because the brakes are, move the pedal 1 millimeter and the brakes are on hard. So we got to explore what's going on there. But then the other thing I mentioned was that the throttle cable, the throttle is hard to modulate. And now that we're seeing, now that everything's tidied up and we're actually taking a look at it, oh my goodness. So here's how this car arrived. This is the throttle setup. So first of all, this rod that attaches to this throttle pedal, you can see how nothing's happening, right, at all when you move the throttle pedal that much. This is all loose. And yes, there's just a flopping cable housing with the cable wrapped around this rod and held in place with a hose clamp. And you can see the throttle cable itself is fraying inside that hose clamp. I don't know, man. It's just, oh my goodness. As you've heard me say other times, I think we can do better. And I'm no expert with carburetors, but I understand. You can see that the cable's coming from the front of the car to the carburetor, and it should be coming around the back of the carburetor, because what that thing's hooked onto with this lovely bracket setup, good heavens, that is the transmission kickdown connection, and the throttle cable should be coming around the back side of the motor and grabbing on up here. So not only is the front of it kind of wacky, but back here we've lost a bunch of the leverage because that distance is not as long as that distance to where it should be connected to. So we're going to be doing the throttle cable around the back side of everything and coming in and grabbing the appropriate part of that lever. So that should greatly improve the way this thing feels. Okay, one more repair that we were going to make. If you look back a couple episodes, you'll notice that the hood on Wide Red has had this center section where the catch for the factory mount, that section of the hood has been, it looks like it's been ripped out of the car. I have no idea what happened, but we want to go ahead and repair it. Whether we use this or not is a different story. It gives us the opportunity to use this latch if we so desire, but it will tidy up the underside of the hood at the very least. So I'm going to use this stock 914 old metal hood that I have, and I'm going to make what's called a splash mold out of just a section that I need. And a splash mold is just a quick and dirty mold that you're going to use to make maybe one part. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It just needs to be able to duplicate this section of the hood. So I'm going to go ahead and just lay up a few layers of fiberglass, really just enough so that I can pop this mold off and make this section, and then we'll graft it into the hood that's on Wide Red. So again, I'm going to go ahead and make this splash mold. And as always, when doing any kind of work like this, I need to prep this surface, and what that means is I need to use some mold release wax to get this all ready to allow the part to come off. And I use this stuff, Partol. It's a paste wax, and you put a few layers of that on here. And then once that's dried and buffed off, you then use this stuff I use called PVA. And what this does is it leaves a very, very, very fine film over the top of the area to which you apply it. That essentially means that when you lay the fiberglass on there, it's really not in contact with the surface. It's touching this layer, this very thin layer of PVA. So when you want to go pull the part off, you've got the mold release wax to help make sure everything releases, and then you've got this layer of PVA. And you'll see how this all works here in a second, but I'm going to go ahead. I just scuffed this, sanded off some of the crap. And again, the other thing about a splash mold, this is not a production part. I'm not worried about the mold being perfect or having, yeah, there's some little rust divots and stuff like that in here. It doesn't matter for our particular application. So I'm going to go ahead and get this waxed and PVA'd, and then I'll start, once that's all dried up and ready to go, I'll start laying the fiberglass on there. And what you saw there was I only did one layer of the Partol, of the mold release wax. This part doesn't have any undercuts. It's very, it's going to be easy enough to pop this thing off. It's not very big. One layer of wax I've found, I've done a fair bit of composite work in the past, and I've found that in a case like this, you don't need to do the multiple layers of waxing. If I was doing a complex part or a really important part, and I was really trying to make a great mold, I would do a lot more prep work. And you can see I took some of the Partol and just got it down in there where the fasteners are. Those are little floating threaded insert set, and I just want to keep the epoxy from getting down in there. And really on this splash mold, all I need are little indents to mark where those features need to be in the part, and we'll be all set. So I now just have to wait for the part all to completely dry. And then I've got some really lightweight glass, and I'll trim a bunch of pieces up to make sure it lays down nicely in all these more complicated areas. And then I can back it up with some heavier stuff that I've got in a different roll over there. But again, this just has to be enough to make a very simple mold that we can pop this part out of and get that hood repaired. So let me get this dry and we'll get to work on laying this up. And then off camera, I came back and laid up a couple more layers of a bit heavier cloth in different weave. And I don't know if you can see it, but you can see that the first stuff I used was this lightweight square weave. And then later on, I came back with this heavier weight twill. And the advantage of twill, if you want to call it an advantage, is you can see how it can move around without lifting in other areas. And so when you get into these complex corners and you've got, it's not just a two-dimensional change, it's a three-dimensional, like down in one of these corners or one of these outside corners, a twill weave will conform better without lifting, or what's called bridging. More detail than you care about, but in this case, it didn't really matter. I just had it and I just used it as a heavier outer layer set. So we've probably got, I don't know, in some places I've got 5 or 6 layers here. Perfect for a splash mold. And now I'm just going to let this set up, and we will have everything we need to make the part and graft it into the hood and fix that, make that repair. So I'm going to wrap it for this week and say thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends, and support your local animal rescue if you can. And we'll talk to you all again real soon. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.